board is so impressed with suffering, maybe you should tell him the astonishing tales of Costanza.
You know, if this tenant board is so impressed with suffering, maybe you should tell him the astonishing tales of Costanza. You know, and I've told you guys many, many times, the word if, especially at the beginning of a clause, can be really tough to hear. If this is what we should say. You know, if this, and that's exactly what Jerry says. He does say if. It's really tough to catch, but he says it. You know, if this, so we got to catch that rhythm. If there's no if, this, 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 if this, if this, there's a difference in the rhythm. And this is where I say, if you can say it, you can hear it. If you can say, if this, as naturally in a real conversation, just like me now, then you'll hear it. If you can say it, you can hear it. Problem is, you've probably never said, if this, you've probably never said that. So now we're practicing. It's a great time to practice. If this tenant board, and a lot of you in the acting section, I wasn't hearing that stop sound. I want to hear that. Tenant board. Is tenant a common word? No. In 1 year, how many times have I used the word tenant? Once, maybe, right? If you have an apartment, if you live in an apartment, or if you own an apartment and people are renting from you, then you're probably going to use the word a couple times a year, especially if you're the owner. But as a renter, or as if you don't rent, not really. You're really not going to use it much. So it is a word that's going to keep its pronunciation, at least the stop sound. Now, we could cancel the T, tenant board. It's possible to cancel the T. It is, yes. But again, it's not that common, so stop the T. Tenant board. If this tenant board is so impressed with, so it's really tough to hear the ED. But the S's can cancel it. We know that. Grammatically, we need it. It's a past participle, like an adjective. The tenant board is so impressed. Oh, they're so happy. They really love it. If they're so impressed with, but that S is going to cancel the T. Impressed with, and kind of a stop sound actually. Impressed with suffering. Maybe you should tell them. Them has 3 pronunciations. Do you guys remember what the pronunciations of them are? We can say, of course, them. Perfect pronunciation. We can make it a schwa and say thum. It's got to be fast. Thum. And we frequently just say Now remember, him can also sound like So I like sometimes is I like him, and sometimes it's I like them. So we need the context to know what it is. In this case, the tenant board is a group of people, therefore them. Tell them the astonishing tales of Costanza. Remember, Kramer had a similar book. That's what Jerry's referring to. Of course, George doesn't have the book, but that's the reference. If this tenant board is so impressed with suffering, maybe you should tell him the astonishing tales of Costanza. I'll try that again. If this tenant board is so impressed with suffering, maybe you should tell him the astonishing tales of Costanza. The astonishing tales of Costanza. Tales of Costanza. We can cancel that V. I think Jerry kind of kept it. I should. Jerry says, if this tenant board, they are the people who are responsible for choosing who gets an apartment. It's like an interview. If this tenant board is so impressed with suffering, maybe you should tell them the astonishing tales of Costanza. The sufferings of George Costanza. Can you think of any time that George has suffered. You know, we only studied we've only studied Seinfeld, what, 20 times maybe, and maybe more than that. But yeah, there's a lot of Seinfeld episodes. Are you familiar with any time that George has suffered? If you can think of an example, nah, forget it. Maybe. And George says, yes, Shazam. Yeah, do you know Shazam?
Shazam!
That was popular when I was a kid. Probably nobody knows it. But anyway, Shazam in daily English means yes, eureka, bingo, giddy up. Kramer would say giddy up. I should.
You know, if this tenant board is so impressed with suffering, maybe you should tell them the astonishing tales of Costanza.